Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about enzymes. Enzymes is not going to be just this video. I'm going to be making an entire series. I'm going to be making a playlist and addressing the 6 enzyme classes. These 6 you see right here, they all have their duty to do. And I figured it would not fit the style of the rest of my channel to just stuff them all into one video. And hence, I'm gonna make a playlist so they'd be more easier to access. Enzymes are often called biocatalyzators or biochemical catalyzators. That's because in this graph, you see the required activation energy needed for a biochemical reaction to happen. The yellow graph displays the activation energy needed for a biochemical reaction without an enzyme. The purple one with enzyme. So as you can see, firing off a reaction with enzymes is a lot easier than without. Think of it as lighting a fire. Imagine you have a stick and you're rubbing to effectively produce heat to somehow make dry leaves burn and catch fire. No. Instead, you just use a match. And that match in this case would be the enzyme. The enzymes can be influenced through inhibitors though. They disable the enzyme either permanently or upon competition. Let me explain. First off though, we need these descriptions of abbreviations. The Km describes the binding affinity of a substrate. A substrate is the material an enzyme creates its product with. Ki is the thermodynamic parameter and the binding affinity of the inhibitor. The inhibitor is what slows down the cell or even stops it from working at all. And the Kcat is a variable depending upon the max velocity and the concentration of the featuring substrate and enzyme. First of all, there's the competitive inhibitor. As you see here, these reaction arrows go back and forth. That's because, depending on the kinetic energy delivered here by these k variables, it is decided whether the inhibitor or the substrate enters the enzyme. The substrate would be processed there. The substrate would be being processed there, whilst the inhibitor tries to prevent that. So with E being the enzyme, S being the substrate, and I being the inhibitor, you can make up ways. For example, E can choose to unite with I, and hence S would be left alone. E and I would then go this way to the EI, which is the binding of the enzyme and the inhibitor. However, they can go back. They can reverse this action. This action can be reversed, which can be seen through these double peaked arrows. Then, after this is reversed, the enzyme can choose again. If it chooses to unite with the substrate, it will go this way to the ES. The ES is the abbreviation for the enzyme substrate complex, in which the enzyme chose to unite with the substrate, and this can be reversed too. It can be reversed too, and it theoretically could be going back and forth. But it most likely won't. Because once the reaction has reached this point, it cannot go back any further. P stands for product. So this is when the enzyme is done with the substrate and has the done product already released. Then the inhibitor can disturb as much as it wants. It's already over. The Kcat, by the way, stands for the kinetic energy depending on the material, on the substrate. Then there's the uncompetitive inhibition. This is a little more complicated, and here we'll go a little deeper into the mathematics. So we have the enzyme and the substrate again. Then I made these little ways with K1 and K minus 1. Why are they K1 and K minus 1? It's because this is the first track they can follow, as you see here, with a 1. And And also, it's the first one that can go back, hence the -1. Then, after the enzyme substrate complex has been formed, they can continue to process the substrate to the product. Or, again, the inhibitor can choose to disturb. From here, they can only go back. The inhibitor can only leave and leave the enzyme and the substrate be. From here, it will have to be chosen again. Do they want to go back? Do they want to go to the ESI? Or do they want to finish the process by processing the substrate to a product? This all depends on the case, and the K stands for velocity constant, and the higher the value for K, the higher is the velocity for this entire reaction. Then we have the non-competitive inhibitors. Here there are a lot more opportunities. The non-competitive inhibitor is not necessarily there to prevent the reaction, but to disturb and lower the efficiency of which. You can take a moment and look at this and figure out possible ways, or take a screenshot. As always, we have the enzyme, the substrate, having different paths they can go, or they can finish with the enzyme and the product. Then, last but not least, there's the irreversible inhibition. Here, the inhibitor sticks itself into the enzyme and done. That's why it's called irreversible inhibition, because you can't undo it. This is why it also earned the nickname of suicide inhibition, because the inhibitor will stay there until the enzyme dies. As well as the inhibitors, cofactors can also influence the efficiency of enzymes. For instance, carbonic anhydrase requires zinc to work. Let me show you. Here we have a molecule of carbonic anhydrase. For the reaction to take place, zinc in the center is required. This is because as soon as zinc is there, the overall pKa value of the surroundings will be lowered from 15.7 to 7 flat. And then the enzyme is back in its original state. Note that the pKa is not the pH. The pKa is not affected by the concentration of the acid. And also, a H+, a sole proton, will be split off. And as well as that, a hydroxide ion is formed on top. Here, because it has a negative charge, CO2 can easily bind to the OH-, thus resulting in a total on the top of HCO3-. This entire top can then be taken off and replaced by some more H2O. And that's it for the video. If you like the channel and want to see more every Saturday, then feel free to subscribe. You can always change your mind, and it's totally free. If you wish to give me feedback or have any suggestions for this channel, feel free to share them in the comments. See you next time.